live program. This time for Tuesday. What is today's date? March 16, 2021. So nice you could be here with me this evening. As you know, this program is set aside for you to ask your questions, give your comments on any topic whatsoever. And I, as my role as host in this program, will endeavor to answer your questions to the best of my ability, using our Catholic faith, our scripture, the tradition, our fathers, doctors, saints, theologians, catechisms, councils, popes, and just about anything I can absorb and feed to you to answer your question so that you walk away satisfied. We set aside this program on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 8 p.m. to around 9:30 p.m. Although last week, Wednesday, we went to 10:45 because I took it upon myself to answer all the questions that were on the board. Now, remember, we do have some rules here, and that is that we're trying to reduce our chit-chat on the board as much as possible and leave room for questions. And so that means that if you don't have a question, please lay aside and allow that room for somebody else to ask a question. Or if you just want to make a short comment, that's okay. Also, I want you to know that we have another rule that we've established, which is if you have a question, please put the word question in front of your question and put it in capital letters. They're very easy to see. So Question, colon, all in capital letters would be great for me because as I slip down the board, I will see that. Question. It's easy for me to find. So it looks like one of our streams is having connection issues. Don't know why that is the case, but I've just been alerted to that. So that's probably why I'm not seeing any questions on the board here. At any rate, we'll wait for that. And as you know, also, we cover a specific topic at the beginning of the program. And just so happens that our topic today, before I get to our advertisements, is going to be what the Vatican declared on Monday concerning marriage. How do they define marriage and whether they can bless civil unions, all that kind of stuff. So we'll get into that in a few minutes. First, I want to make some advertisements. Don't usually do this, but every once in a while it's good to do, especially with some new products that we have available. And one of the first new products is our book on Fatima. Fatima, fulfilled, but still foreboding. There you see a picture of Sister Lucia as a young child, and she looks foreboding, doesn't she? That's why I picked that photo. Yeah, she looks a little concerned, and she has every right to be, even at that young age. At any rate, this book is for sale. Not too bad, just about 100 or so pages. And in this book, let me tell you why you might want to get this. This is just like any other Fatima book that you've seen on the market. No. It's quite different. This Fatima book says that the current zeitgeist concerning Fatima is probably all wrong, and that we shouldn't be looking forward to a future Fatima fulfillment of the conversion of Russia or the so-called era of peace, because when you look at it all together, those things just don't fit. And it's about time that we re-looked at this whole issue and figured out why we're now in 2021 and we're what I would call the Fatimists are not seeing what they wanted to see. And they're still anticipating a future conversion of Russia and some era of peace coming, some kind of bliss on earth, all that stuff. Sorry to disappoint you, but in this book, I tell you that that is the wrong way to go. And I can testify to it very honestly because I used to believe the same thing. Okay. So for many years, I wrote a book on it myself in 2013 with another author. And we were convinced that, the world needed to be put right by the fact that no Pope had ever done the consecration correctly. And therefore, heaven would not bless us. And I looked at the words that in the 1940s, early 1940s, to Pius XII, and also involved there with Sister Lucia, of course, and all the exchanges and the conversations between those four people. And I began to see things quite differently than I had before. And even though Pius XII did not do what you would call a complete consecration, he did enough that pleased heaven, and she gave us an answer to his attempts in proportion to what he did. And heaven, of course, is the judge of that. And so with that, we find that the period of peace has already come and gone. The conversion of Russia has been taking place in the whole 20th century and is now in full steam. And the only thing lingering is the third secret, and that deals with the church, and that's still ongoing. And it's foreboding in that sense when we see what may happen to the church in the future. And so that's what the book's all about. That's why it might be worth spending, $15, I guess it is. I'm not sure. You can get the PDF for $10. And so it's worth looking at. And we've had it up for sale on robertsongenis.org. You can get it there. Hardback, paperback, or PDF, whatever is convenient for you. Okay, and another product we have up there on the website is the DVD Einstein, the Closet Geocentrist. Many people don't know this about Einstein, but in his first theory, the special theory of relativity, a paper that he wrote in 1905, he tried to, he invented a new theory of physics to try to answer all the experiments that showed the Earth wasn't moving. And there were several of them, about a half a dozen of them done in the 1800s. And of course, they couldn't have that, you see. And so he invented special relativity purposely to answer these experiments and basically reinvented physics in order to do so. And then, of course, 10 years later, he had to invent the general theory of relativity, which was almost totally reversed the special theory. And that theory allowed the Earth to be in the center of the universe and not moving, believe it or not. And so all the stuff that I teach comes from this man right here, Albert Einstein. I'm just a messenger boy. But of course, everybody wants to kill the messenger boy because he brings a message they don't like and they're not used to, but well worth it. 2 hours and 45 minutes of nothing but pure science on this very issue. So afford yourself that. We also have another video called How the World Was Made. And this video takes a literal interpretation of Genesis and combines that with our modern science and shows you just how to interpret Genesis, all literally, all 7 days. And so that's available. That's only an hour long, but we're making another version of this is probably going to be 2 hours, maybe a little longer, who knows, because we're going to introduce the other days too, or days 5, 6, and 7, along with the days we already have in there, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that'll be out probably, let me see, what is today? March. I would say that might be out before September. And then, of course, we have our old standby, The Principle. Don't forget that. This was our movie that appeared in theaters back in 2014. We had about a dozen theaters. We showed it in the United States. 90 minutes long. It's got very famous scientists in it, and all suggesting that the Earth is in the center of the universe, believe it or not. And we have some old standby books I just happened to grab on my way to the desk, and one of those is Not by Faith Alone. I'm sure you might have heard of this already. And even at that time, I had a foreword written by Scott Hahn. Can you believe that? Well, there you are, 775 pages of everything you wanted to know about justification. Still, now it's in its second edition. We have that. We also have Not by Scripture Alone and Not by Bread Alone, the 3 Not by books. And you can get those at robertsongenis.org for a small fee, of course. And you can get also the second apologetics book in our Bible series, and that's the Apocalypse of St. John. The Catholic Apologetic Study Bible, Volume 2, the Apocalypse of St. John. There you see a picture of Jesus coming back at his second coming, and you can get that picture. There's only one place that I know it exists, and that is at the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C., where Catholic University is. As a matter of fact, that's where I got it. I had to ask them to give me their best picture of it, and they were so kind to do so, and there it is. And that was many years ago. All right, so that's all. Then we got many, many books. So go visit robertsongenis.org and see what we got for your reading pleasure, viewing pleasure. So many things available for you. All right, so let's get to it. We're going to talk tonight about what the Vatican said about same-sex unions. This is from the Associated Press. I'm going to read this to you. It's not too long. And we'll see what's cooking over there at the Vatican. The Vatican decreed Monday, that's this past Monday, by the way, that the Monday before last. So that would be the 8th of March. The Vatican decreed Monday that the Catholic Church cannot bless same-sex unions, since God cannot bless sin. Okay, so right away, let me make a comment there. I mean, that's very important because the Vatican basically, to some people's surprise probably, has killed 2 birds with 1 stone here. First of all, it says it can't bless same-sex unions, and you might think, okay, well, maybe they're going to take a neutral stance on it. Because why would I say that? Well, because the Pope earlier, a month or so ago, gave the impression that the Vatican was going to put their stamp of approval on same-sex unions because of the children that were involved. And it said basically that they wanted to protect the children legally, and the only way to do that is to give the family legal status, which means that you would give a civil union some legal status in order to protect the children that came into that family. They were adopted, or they were surrogate motherhood, or something happened that produced a child for this so-called family. And the Pope put his blessing on it in a sort of roundabout way, not exactly blessing civil unions per se, but saying that the children have to be protected legally. And if I wasn't so smart, I'd say, wow, okay, but doesn't that basically legitimize a civil union in the backhand way? Well, it certainly does. So, and the Pope made no distinction there. He didn't say, and by the way, I'm not saying that civil unions are being blessed by the church, nothing to that effect. It was just all about protecting the children with no recourse to now fill in this huge hole you've just made, which is, all right, well, what about these civil unions? Are you saying that they're just legal in the sense that they protect children, or are they legal in the sense that they're a civil union? What is it? Can you give us some definition? Because you just open up a can of worms, and we need to know what the answers are to this, because, wow, you say a lot by saying nothing. And if you don't say anything to define the parameters of what you mean by a legal civil union to protect a child, and what the extents are, what the parameters are, what the margins are, are you suggesting that it's okay for people to have civil unions, and then if they have a child that confirms it? Just where are we going to go with all this? Okay. So the Vatican, and this is the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, because that's the second paragraph. It says, the Vatican's Orthodoxy Office, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, issued a formal response Monday to a question about whether Catholic clergy can bless gay unions. Now notice it's not the Pope talking here. This is the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And I assume it's the prefect. And a prefect, that's the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, making this statement, which was in the first paragraph I read, saying the church cannot bless same-sex unions since that God cannot bless sin. All right. Now, if the Pope had said something like that, when he had the opportunity 2 months ago, it wouldn't have raised as much confusion. So here you have the CDF coming in and laying down the law without any recourse to the Pope. We won't find one statement here from the Pope about this issue, which is kind of odd, especially since this issue has reached a boiling point. And so there may be some difference of opinion between the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and the Pope. And unless we have more information, I don't even know if the Pope is on the side of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. I would have to see something from him saying, yes, I uphold what the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith just taught regarding the fact that the Catholic Church cannot bless same-sex unions. And again, as I said, it's not because the Vatican's going to take a neutral stance and just say, well, we just can't go there. Okay. It's one thing to say that a child is protected in a gay union. It's quite another thing to say that the church is blessing gay, but we're just not going to go there. Well, they did go there. And the reason they gave for not blessing same-sex unions is because it's a sin. Wow. That's pretty clear. It's a sin. The church cannot bless sin. So a same-sex union, according to the CDF, is a sin. Have we heard Pope Francis say that? Just reiterating the point I made, 3 minutes ago. Have we heard him say that? And why didn't he take the opportunity here to back up the CDF? So I would like to know. Curious minds want to know. All right, so let's go on. As I said, the Vatican Orthodoxy Office, the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, issued a formal response Monday to a question about whether gay Catholic clergy can bless gay unions. The answer, contained in a 2-page explanation published in 7 languages and approved by Pope Francis, was negative. Okay, so here it's telling us that it was approved by Pope Francis, but how was it approved? That is something that's very important to know. Did he approve it in writing? Did he approve it by hand waving? Did he approve it by making a statement to the CDF? Just how was that done? How formal and official was it? We would need to know. Okay. Now, some people might say, well, if the Pope isn't disagreeing with the CDF, then that's a tacit agreement, and therefore we can take it as the Pope officially agreeing with the CDF. I hope that's the case. I hope that it is the case. But as you know, the reason I'm bringing this up is because of what the Pope said a couple of months ago about civil unions being legal in order to protect a child that is part and parcel with that so-called family. So how can they be legal in one sense and then not legal and not able to be blessed by the Catholic Church in another sense? This is a very fuzzy region. And this is what happens when you give the wrong answer to a issue, and then that's going to compound the problems as we go down the road with all the contingencies that are related to the first problem, you see. So that's why I raised that issue. It says here, the decree distinguished between the church's welcoming and blessing of gay people, which it upheld, but not their unions, since any such sacramental recognition could be confused with marriage. Okay, so here we have the dual stance of the church on the issue of gay people. On the one hand, the church welcomes and blesses gay people. Okay, and then on the other hand, it doesn't want to bless unions of legal, unions of gay people, because that might appear to give the impression that they have some kind of marriage just like heterosexual people do. Okay, so the last one we can understand. The first part is also a little troubling because when you say welcoming and blessing gay people, what that means necessarily is that you do not tell them, you do not teach them that the gay lifestyle is wrong, morally wrong. And you've already put your foot in the door because you've just said that same-sex unions are morally wrong. And because of that, God cannot bless them because, as the Vatican said, it's sin. So if a same-sex union is sin, well, isn't the gay lifestyle itself a sin? Why wasn't that made clear here? Instead, what we find is that we're not going to mention the fact that the gay lifestyle is sinful. We're just going to mention that because they're, human beings, we welcome and bless them. Bless them? You bless gay people? Is that what Jesus would do? You take out your wrists, what would Jesus do? And ask yourself, what would he do? If he walking down the street of Galilee and saw a gay couple, would he go up there and shake their hand and bless them and then walk on and not be concerned about them? Well, that's what the Vatican's teaching here. Okay. Now, it's one thing to accept a human being for the fact that he's a human being made in the image of God. Okay. Whether you're gay, whether you have a tendency toward gay people, whether you're heterosexual, whatever you are, if you're a human being, you deserve the respect of being a human being. Okay. But we don't use words like welcoming and blessing as if it's okay for a gay person to come to church who's openly admittedly gay. And he comes to church and he knows he's in a sinful lifestyle, and yet that's okay. Instead of the pastor telling him, you need to get your life straight first, okay? Because now you're living in mortal sin. You're in mortal sin just like the person, who's divorced and remarried, or, is living a life of fornication or whatever. You're just in the same boat as they are. So why would we accept you any more than we would accept them, when the first thing we should do is tell them the state of sin that they're in and the lack of grace that they have, and then put the limitations on them that are according to that, what the church is dealing with people. Okay. So you see, when you make the first mistake, then you're going to make other mistakes. And then you're going to combine something that's good with something that's not so good. And you're going to have some kind of conflation of ideas and morale and ideologies and all kinds of things. And it's going to get a little confusing. Not a little, a lot confusing. Well, let me move on. It says here, this is the AP writing this, okay, Associated Press. The Vatican holds that gays must be treated with dignity and respect. Okay, see, that's one thing. They must be treated with dignity and respect. But welcoming and blessing is not the same thing as treating with dignity and respect. Okay? I can treat someone with dignity and respect. I don't have to welcome him into my home. And I don't have to bless him. Okay? The least is that I of course, treat him with dignity and respect. But that's true of all human beings. Okay? Even criminals on death row get treated with respect. Okay, they have a right to an attorney. They get 3 meals a day. They have a right to see a priest or a minister, whatever. Because why? Because they have a certain dignity and respect we give them as human beings, despite their crimes. Okay. But the gay sex is intrinsically disordered. In other words, okay, let me read that again. The Vatican holds that gays must be treated with dignity and respect, but that gay sex is intrinsically disordered. Catholic teaching holds that marriage, a lifelong union between a man and a woman, is part of God's plan as intended for the sake of creating new life. Okay, second part's right. But this whole thing about intrinsically disordered, when you write, and I know because I've been a writer for 40 some odd years, and I know how to shade things. I know how to come right out and say things. I know how to go in between those when it's necessary. Okay. And I know when other people do it. There is a thing in the English language called a euphemism, where you take something that, if you were to use the raw description, it would sound very bad. Or it would sound not as kosher as it would be if you use better language, So, like, here's an example. Instead of calling the garbage man a garbage man, we call him a sanitation engineer. That's called a euphemism. Okay? Where we use words that are better sounding than the typical street talk. But that's basically what he is. He's a garbage man in the sense that he picks up everybody's garbage. Okay, now he deserves his dignity and respect too. So I'm not saying anything about his person. I'm just saying how we use the English language. In order to make it sound better, we can call him a sanitation engineer. And that's much more uplifting. Okay. Well, same thing here. Instead of saying that, but that gay sex is morally wrong and sinful, it says intrinsically disordered. Well, you could use that language in a psychology course, a secular psychology course. They could, at least, before the 1970s or 80s, let's say, that's what they would do. They would use words, phrases like this. Homosexuality is intrinsically disordered. Okay. In a secular framework, they could say that. But in an ecclesiastical framework, we go a step beyond them. And we say gay sex is morally sinful. Just like adultery, just like killing, just like stealing. Okay. That's what we would do. So again, when you use these kinds of words to try to soften and make it more socially acceptable, you're going down the slippery slope. Okay. All right. Since gay unions, this is the what? 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraph. Since gay unions are not intended to be part of that plan, they cannot be blessed by the church, the document said. And quote, the presence in such relationships of positive elements, which are in themselves to be valued and appreciated, cannot justify these relationships and render them legitimate objects of an ecclesial blessing. Since the positive element exists within the context of a union not ordered to the Creator's plan, the response said. So here you have a paragraph that's trying to play both sides of the fence. Although we do have to applaud the CDF for coming out and saying that they're not going to bless same-sex unions. Okay, let's make that clear at the top, that they did say that, and hallelujah that they said that. Okay, but then they say that there are positive elements in such relationships. In other words, there's a positive element in a gay relationship. What? What is positive about it? You know, that they sit down and eat together, or go to the store together, or watch the movies together? Is that what you mean by positive, some kind of human relationship here? Well, if you are, then of course you're avoiding all the other aspects of the relationship that make it bad, that make it immoral. And no matter what good relationship you have, no matter how much they think they love each other, it's not going to make up for the fact that they're living in sin. Okay, that's the point. So all this kind of back and forth, well, yeah, they got some positive elements, but you know, we can only go so far. We can't bless a civil union. Okay, yeah, all right, we'll give you some points for that. But don't suggest to them that they can live in this relationship, this gay relationship, and somehow be pleasing to the church and to God. Okay, that's an impossibility. If you're going to take a stand, take a stand. And stop being wishy-washy about it. All right, first, then it goes on and says, God does not and cannot bless sin, of course. He blesses sinful man so that he may recognize that he is part of his plan of love and allow himself to be changed by him, it said. Well, he doesn't bless sinful man, okay? God wants man to repent of his sin, admit that he's a sinner, and continues to sin, and then God will bless him. That's what David says in Romans 4, in Psalm 32. Blessed is the man whose sins are forgiven by God, not through works, but by faith. Okay? That's what God's looking for. So in order for God to even bless a camaraderie between two gay people, they have to admit that what they're doing is wrong. Okay? That's where it all starts. All right, so it says Francis has endorsed providing gay couples with legal protections in same-sex unions, but that is in reference to the civil sphere, not within the church. You see, this is another problem, is in order to give some protection to a child, you in some fashion have to sanction the marriage in a civil framework and leave out the moral framework. And so now your civil law is distinguished from your moral law. So the civil law is not based on morality anymore. It's based on whatever the society thinks is civil. Okay? No, that's not the way civil laws are made. Civil laws are part and parcel with the moral law. That's how we get the civil law. You know, if it's wrong to steal, well, the civil law says what kind of punishment you're going to get if you do steal. And if you didn't steal with intent, they may give you a little grace. So the civil law says. Okay? So all the civil law is going to do is draw the parameters around what the moral law says, so that you know how to distribute punishment, how to rectify damage that's been done by, somebody could sue the other person and get money in exchange for the damage that's been done, all kinds of things the civil law takes care of. Okay? But once you make that distinction between the civil law and the moral law, and you say, okay, civilly it's okay to have a sexual union between two gay people, even though we don't believe it's morally correct. So now you have a false dichotomy. Okay? You have a false dichotomy. And that's what happens when you give the wrong answer. All right. Let me just read a little bit more here. In the new document and an accompanying unsigned article, the Vatican said questions have been raised about blessing same-sex unions in recent years after Francis had insisted on the need to better welcome and accompany gays in the church. Well, don't you think that's going to happen? I mean, does it take a rocket scientist to figure out that because of what Francis has said about gay people from the time he was on the airplane in 2015, when he was asked if a gay person can go to heaven, he said, "Who am I to judge?" Until now, and we've seen the fruits of this. Okay, so. And it goes on, it says, in the article, the Vatican stressed the fundamental and decisive distinction between gay individuals and gay unions, noting that, quote, the negative judgment on the blessing of unions of persons of the same sex does not imply judgment on persons. Yeah, I think you've got that message across. You wanted to make that distinction, and by golly, that's the distinction we have. The question is that right? To imply that, well, once you have the union, the gay union, well, you've crossed the line, brother. And, now you're in sinful territory. But you can be gay, and that's okay. We'll welcome you and bless you into the church. Wow. How did you come up with that distinction? If the gay person is okay just because he's gay and you can welcome and bless him, well, then what's wrong with a civil union between two gay people? What has happened to make the distinction between something that was good or acceptable to something that's not acceptable? Or was it the wrong choice to begin with to say that, oh, to be gay is okay? That was the first mistake, you see. And that led almost to the second mistake. But in order to alleviate that problem, you made a distinction between being gay and being married to a gay person. That's what you did. Okay. Now, this has nothing to do with dignity and respect. Okay. We've already said that. Every person, gay, not gay, anything in between, transsexual, transvestite, whatever, they deserve respect and dignity because they're made in the image of God. Although sometimes it's hard to tell, they have the right to receive dignity because they're a human being. So that's already established. Making distinctions between gay unions and just being gay as if one's okay and the other's not, well, what criterion are you using for that? Can you show us anything from the history, from the fathers, the medievals, scripture, our tradition? Where are you getting all this from? Okay, see, that has yet to be explained. All right. But it explained the rationale for forbidding a blessing of such unions, noting that any union that involves sexual activity outside of the marriage cannot be blessed because it is not in the state of grace, or order to both receive and express the good that is pronounced and given by the blessing. So here you have more gobbledygook, okay? The criteria now is sexual activity outside of marriage. Well, okay, but didn't you just said they couldn't get married, and you know they're engaging in sexual activity. So what difference does a marriage make? They're already engaging in sexual activity before they wanted to get married. Now they're married and do the same sexual activity. Okay, so what made the one better than the other? Okay. As you can see, it starts to break down. If you don't use the right rationale in the beginning, your arguments, even though they may have a glimmer of truth in them, like saying same-sex marriages are bad, and of course, who couldn't figure that out by themselves? We don't even need the church to say that to us. We all know that that's wrong. That's part of natural law. Okay? But the church sort of puts this glimmer of truth on it, like, well, yeah, we got this part right. You know, you can't have, you're not going to bless a civil union, but it's okay if they have the gay lifestyle prior to marrying somebody who's gay. That's what they're implying. Okay? And of course, we know that's all wrong. So, there you have it. Now, let's get to our question board. Let's see what is cooking. All right. Question: is Antiochus Epiphanes a type of antichrist that we can look to for expectations of the future antichrist? Yes, he is a type of the antichrist, and there are several types of antichrist in the Old Testament. Whenever you find, especially the phrase abomination of desolation, as you do in Daniel chapter 8, 9, 11, 12. And then you find it again in Matthew 24:15, in the Olivet Discourse from Jesus. And of course, then you find refinement of that. They don't call it abomination anymore. In the epistles, he calls it, the Antichrist or the apostasy, something of that nature. They're all types leading up to they're all antitypes leading up to the type, which is the last individual, the Antichrist. That is the man of sin that Paul talks about in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Okay. So in my Matthew commentary, I tie in all those types and antitypes for you so that you can see the thread from the Old Testament to the New Testament all the way to the Apocalypse. So yes, to answer your question. All right. David Cambiano, I've started reading your 3-volume Galileo Was Wrong series. We'll let you know if I have questions. Okay, David, I'm waiting for that. And question: have you read E. Michael Jones's The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit? If so, what are your thoughts on his view that the Jewish cultural identity is a recurring rejection of logos and leads to continual rebellion and social revolution? I think he's right on. As a matter of fact, I wrote the first review of that book when it first came out. What was that, about 10 years ago? Yeah, and Michael used to cover my review of it. Well, he had an advertisement for that book in the first, on the front cover, inside front cover of Culture Wars magazine, and that was there for over a year when the book first came out. And then I had written a review of the book for Culture Wars magazine, probably a few months after the book came out. And that was a long review, probably about 20 pages or so. So yes, and I think he hits on a point that's you just can't deny. The whole Jewish culture is geared toward rejecting Jesus Christ. I mean, it's as simple as night and day. Now, some people may go off on their own tangents on how they're going to deal with that. And some are very bad, okay, because they're not speaking about, respect and dignity for human beings. They don't give the Jews the dignity and the respect that they deserve as human beings. And somehow, because this has been the motif of the Jewish religion since it began, that somehow this, is a rationale for people to attack them or kill them or whatever. Okay? No, it's a rationale that they can't become part of your church. That's the basic rationale. They can't become part of the church unless they accept Jesus Christ. That makes sense. That's what Paul taught. He went to the Jewish synagogues and taught them that, look, the Mosaic covenant's over. It's not going to get you anywhere. It was never meant for salvation in the first place. All it did was point you to Jesus Christ, the consummate Jew, who is now telling you Jews, here's the way to go, follow me, Jesus Christ. And if they did so, then Paul allowed them into the church. As a matter of fact, the first members of the church were Jewish, okay? But that's what we should do for the Jewish people. Once we point out this cultural identity, as Jones says it, is rejecting the Logos or rejecting Jesus Christ, and that's inbred in them from generation to generation. It's taught in their Sunday schools, or not her Sabbath schools, their synagogues. It's the number one thing that they're taught, to reject Jesus Christ. He was a fraud. Okay? So if there is any identity marker that the Jews have, it's that. Okay? And let's not mince words here. This is a religion whose central idea is the rejection of the Son of God. There's no other religion in the world like that. Okay? Even the Mohammedans call Jesus a prophet, a good prophet. All right? The other world religions, they consider Jesus a good man, but not the Jews. Okay? So if you know that's a central part of your religion, the central part, question is, are you right? Are you right or are you wrong? Okay, and for 2,000 years since Jesus came, the major opinion from the Jews is, no, we're right. Jesus was a fraud. He's a false prophet. And they're looking for another Messiah. Okay, so look, in order to preach to the Jews, you've got to point this out to them, that this whole idea you have about who Jesus is wrong. It's dead wrong. And if they don't accept it, you move on. You shake the dust off your feet, like Jesus said, and you move on to the next. Okay, and unfortunately, they've been in this mire for 2,000 years, been very, very few converts, and we shouldn't expect many. Okay, and of course, Paul didn't expect many in his day, and neither did Elijah in his day. Elijah is in a time of 800 BC. Perhaps 10 million Jews are alive in his day, and he can only find 7,000 that hadn't bowed the knee to Baal, the false god of Ekron. Okay? 7,000 out of about 10 million. You know what the percentage is of that? Like 0.0014. Okay? So it's true in Elijah's day, it was true in Paul's day. What do you think we're going to see in our day? Same thing. And that's why Jones bothered to write The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit. Because look, if you had the prestige that they had back in the Old Testament, where your God was on your side and against your foes, and that he would beat them for you, basically, and allow you to take their land and all this stuff. Wow, what would that do to your whole psyche? Hey, we're something else, aren't we? We got God himself coming down from heaven on our side and killing all our foes and giving us all this land. And look at the time of David and Solomon, when all the nations around were paying tax to Solomon and they lived in glory. Okay? And you knew that was your heritage, your history, and yet you're beaten up now by the Romans and all the other nations that have come along and subdued you. Wow, wouldn't you begin to think, maybe we are really great, and maybe this suppression from the Christians has been something that God never intended, and he wants us to take our rightful place as the masters of the universe. You see, yeah, that would begin to work in you. And how's that going to come about? Well, it's going to come about by revolution. It's not going to come about by sitting on your thumbs. Okay. And so they began to discover this. 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, and especially in the 1800s. Revolution was the name of the game. And it has worked a charm for them. Okay. So, yeah, that's why the book is good, and I think everybody should read it. All right. Question: do I need your permission to use your New Testament Bible commentary in the footnotes of my revised version of the Douay Rheims Bible? And if so, how does that work? Yeah, you just write whatever you want to write, and then you say, and you put the citation down. New Testament, we should have an acronym for it. NTBC might be the acronym, and then you put the page number, showing people where you got that citation from. That would be, normal intellectual and normal intellectual courtesy is why you would do that. Okay, so let me see. So what would the acronym be? It would be commentary of the New Testament from the Douay Rheims. The acronym for that's probably going to be CNTDR, Commentary of the New Testament from the Douay Rheims. And then you put the page. And first you put the volume, and then you put the page. Okay? All right. I heard Einstein married his cousin and beat women. Well, I don't know why Einstein. Oh, he came up, I guess, because I did some advertisement. Yeah, Einstein does not have a very good track record with women. And his doctor of 25 years, and this is in a book called Pox, P-O-X. And the researcher, I know her, I've talked to her personally. What's her name? Can't remember right now. Anyway, she said that Einstein, no, it was not her. She was going through all the famous people in the world, like Beethoven, all kinds of intellectuals who had syphilis, pox, they used to call it. And then I told her that Einstein had pox. He had syphilis for at least 25 years. And that's because he played around with women like nobody's business. He married Maliva back in, what was that, 1903 or 4, something like that. And then he left her. And by the way, she, Maliva, and the 3 children from that marriage became Catholic. Okay. They converted to Catholicism in 1905, the very year that Einstein wrote his famous paper on special relativity. And the marriage got very bad because he used to play around on her with abandon, and it got to the point where he gave her a regimented schedule, how he would tolerate her. And I know this because I researched it all and I wrote it in my book, Galileo Was Wrong. And then by, what was it, he started an affair with his cousin, Elsa. And Elsa was already married to Max Lowenthal, so her name was Elsa Lowenthal. And they carried on this affair for quite some time. And then Elsa divorced Max and married Einstein, but not after Einstein met her daughter, her 19-year-old daughter, because Elsa Lowenthal was she was just as old as Einstein, who by this time, he was, I don't know, maybe 40s or so. But Elsa had a daughter named Ilse, E-L-S-E, and she was 19. And when Einstein met her, he fell in love. And so he's debating in himself whether he's going to marry Elsa, the mother, or Ilse, the 19-year-old daughter. And of course, Elsa, in competition with her own daughter, makes the moves on Einstein that secures the marriage with him, and Ilse's left in the lurch. And then, of course, after he married Elsa, he started playing around on her, and it got to the point where Elsa, with no other things she could say to him, because now he was world famous, and what are you going to say to a man who's world famous and people worship him, basically? The only thing she could say is, it's okay if you engage in the adultery, but only one woman at a time. That was the limit she put on him. Because as you can imagine, he was having more than one woman at a time before she gave this ultimatum. And what a weak ultimatum it was, but that's the best she could do. So, yeah, he was quite the womanizer. And there are accusations that he did beat Elsa, and also did the same to Maliva, his first wife. I don't know how true they are, but I know people have accused him of that, and among other things. So yeah, he was quite the philanderer. And one thing good he did do was he gave his Nobel Prize money from what he got from the what was it, 1921, I think it was. He got the Nobel Prize money for his, had nothing to do with relativity. It was for the, what was that? What's the scientific name for it? He also got it for the Browning movement that he discovered among free atoms in a solution. It's called the I forget the proper name for it. But he gave that prize money, I think it was $120,000 to Maliva, because he had promised it to her. And that helped take care of the kids, the 3 kids. But his first child was left to die in a sanitarium, and Edward was his name. And he didn't come out very well when he was born, and so they put him in a sanitarium basically to forget about him. But he lived for quite a while, and Einstein never visited him. And so in that sense, he was a bad father. And he died eventually in the sanitarium. The other two children made out fairly well, because now they could float on the name of their father after he became famous, and which they did. And Maliva just sunk into the background, and so did Elsa and Ilse, for that matter. And by the time Einstein died in 1955, April 15th, he showed all the signs of having syphilis, according to his doctor, and that's what they think killed him. So yeah, quite the philanderer he was. And this is not something I'm making up. You can go, there's tons of books written on it now, because after 1987, the curator of the Einstein Museum all restrictions on his materials were lifted in 1987. So all the books started to come out as people did research, especially in the 1990s and 2000s, and they're still being written. A lot that was covered up before is now, open territory, and that's where we're getting all this information from. And it's well researched, and a lot of it comes from the library in Jerusalem, as a matter of fact. All right, excuse me. All right, so let's go on. Question. My name is Kyle. If Adam and Eve were the common ancestors of all men, how do we explain the physical differences between the races? That's an easy one, young Earth, because we would assume that the DNA that makes up every cell of our body, deoxyribonucleic acid, and the 4 amino acids that make it up, are structured in such a way where it allows differences in the makeup of man. We would call them variations, we would call them adaptations, things along those lines. The DNA is not static. It can combine in a almost infinite number of ways, and in that you're going to get an infinite variety of human beings. Okay, and that's the way God built the DNA. All right, so that's where it would come from. Lee Jennifer Corlew Ayers says the enemy is playing both sides. Hegelian dialectic. They gave good statements, so counter statements could be made. No, very good there, Lee Jennifer. And I guess you're talking about how the Vatican is handling this whole gay issue. Yeah, it's a lot of Hegelian dialectic. We'll give a thesis, then we'll give an antithesis, and then in between all that, we'll have a thesis. Hopefully we can defend that thesis. What they end up doing is getting caught between the untruth that they told at the beginning and then the truth they're trying to tell at the end, and somehow that's going to buffer the middle and make it more palatable to you, you see. No, it doesn't work that way. Morality does not work that way. All right, question from Gustavo says, Dr. Sungenis, is it against God's order for a child to bless their parent due to the father being the head of the household? What's your take on it? I bless my wife and kids, and now they bless me. It depends on what you mean by bless, okay? Like in the Old Testament, when it says, Jacob blessed his sons or whatever, that was a legal thing. Okay, I mean, it wasn't just Jacob being nice to his sons. He blessed them because the inheritance law said, this is how you give the inheritance to your child. You bless them in the name of God and say, now you are going to inherit this thing from me. Okay, so it had some legal substance to it. It wasn't just, hey, or I want to bless you because I like you, kind of a thing. Okay. So when you're talking here about a father blessing his children, children blessing the father, it's harmless. Okay. There's nothing wrong with it at all. You're just exchanging effronteries with one another. And because of that, you show your love to one another and you commit yourselves to one another. That's good. Okay. Nothing wrong with that at all. But it's not in the context of blessing where, we're talking about exchange of fortunes, goods, inheritance, or whatever between people. That's the way that word was used in biblical times. Okay. All right. Or even say a priest. When we ask the priest to bless us, we kneel down, we make the sign of the cross, and he makes the sign, he gives us a blessing. Well, that blessing counts. Why? Because he's an ecclesiastic and he carries the power of grace. And grace is what we need from God to remain holy and not to sin, whether it's sanctifying grace or actual grace. And the priest imparts that to us when we ask for his blessing. So something's being exchanged. It's not just a blessing where he says, hi, I hope things go well for you. Not that kind of a thing. It's actually something he's giving to us that we can't get otherwise. So in that sense, it's a legal blessing. All right. Question: as LGBTQ marriage had been blown out of the water for good by this, hopefully. Yeah, I mean, if this doesn't do it, I don't know what would. Let's put it that way. Now, I can see someone coming along and saying, well, is that infallible? Yeah, they will say that. Is that an infallible statement from the CDF? And the Pope's approval, was that an infallible approval? Or was that just some tacit approval? Let's go on to the next question. All right, somebody's going to say that. And the Vatican is now going to have to get down to the nitty gritty. And let's hopefully they can do that. I recently bought Fatima book, very good, even from historical point of last century, but I really love Geocentric view. St. Hildegard, incredible she had these visions. Thank you. All right, my pleasure there, Zig. David the Hermit question: are you familiar with gauge theory? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? Gosh, gauge theory. Man, it's been a long time. It's been a long time, David. So I'm not equipped at this point. It's one of those things, like there's a word you keep looking up because you keep forgetting the meaning of it. So how many times I've looked up that word and I still don't remember the meaning of it. And gauge theory is one of those things. I've looked it up and I understood it when I read it, and then, okay, I don't need it. So, I let it go, and then it'll come up again. Yeah. Gauge theory. So yeah, I'm at a loss to help you on that. Alien spaceship sound effects. All right. Question: a Catholic apologist said the wife has no authority to lay hands on her husband because the man is the head of the home. She can't lay her hand on his head, but can place it on his shoulder. Well, neither scripture nor the church teaches that the wife can lay hands on her husband in any place, because laying hands on someone is an ecclesiastical function in which gifts of the Holy Spirit are given to another individual, namely another man. And that's done by laying hands on the man, whether shoulders or head doesn't make any difference. Usually it's the head. So that's an ecclesiastical function only. The government doesn't do that, and husbands and wives don't do that. Whether it's to each other or, to one or the other doesn't make any difference. So that has no place in the husband-wife relationship. Okay. And that's, again, because it's an ecclesiastical function that has a specific meaning. Okay. And only to be used in the church. Joel Saint. I know you. Bob, do you think this means that the Pope is losing influence? Joel, he's lost it a long time ago. I think he lost it on the airplane when he said, "Who am I to judge?" Ever since then, it's been downhill. So, but this is what you get. I mean, he's a liberal Jesuit from Argentina. Okay, this is what you're going to get. And he's shown his colors. He's let us know he's a liberal Jesuit. I think what you're referring to is the fact that the CDF made the first move on this ahead of the Pope. Now, that may be a political move, because normally, with as verbose as this Pope has been on almost every topic that's come under his rainbow, and I use rainbow in excuse the pun, but for him to let the CDF do the talking for him on this one may be an indication that although he approved it, he didn't want to put his face on it. I don't know. I hate to read between the lines, and I hate to assume things. I hate to insinuate things. But when you've seen as much as we have from this Pope, you begin to get a little suspicious of the, I don't know, the communique that comes forth from the Vatican. Because there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. As I said, they've created a dichotomy between civil unions and just being gay, which is a false dichotomy. So, the Pope's opened up the door for that whole ambiguity to sort of cloud his words. And because of that, I don't know if he feels he's losing force, but I would say that to get the CDF to do the talking for him means something. I'm not quite sure what it means yet, but we'll see. Well, nice to talk to you, Joel. Hope things are going well with you and Audrey. Question: do women need to be veiled when attending church? Is it a sin for them not to? Well, according to 1950 or 60 years of Catholic Church teaching, yeah, it's required of women to wear a veil. St. Paul teaches about it in 1 Corinthians 11. He's quite clear. And it's not the long hair that's going to serve as the veil, in case somebody's wondering that. It was in the 1960s when Cardinal Bonini, Freemason, by the way, made some suggestion in a 1962 interview with the press in Italy, when someone from the press asked him, are they going to do away with women wearing veils at the Mass? And Bonini said something very ambiguous, like, well, we're talking about that now, period. And that's all he needed to say. And then the newspapers hit with women allowed to dispense with veils in Catholic Mass. You could just see the New York Times headlines or the Los Angeles Times or Chicago Tribune or, whatever it was in Europe. That's what they were saying. Okay. But there had been no statement from Vatican II at all. And then they point to Paul VI, 1976. It wasn't an encyclical. What was that? I forget the title of what he wrote there. But he was talking about women in authority. And he made some slight mention of veils, in which he said, and women no longer wear veils. So everybody ran to that and said, here, we got the papal statement that women are not to wear veils. And, you can't do that with the Pope's writing. It was an ancillary statement that he was using to form an analogy, okay? And by that time, by 1976, the women weren't wearing veils. But what I'm trying to say was there's no official sanction from the church that women aren't to wear veils any longer. It just sort of happened by itself. After Bonini made his statement in 1962, it just sort of took a life of its own. And it was like that once the newspapers had it, where women don't have to wear, that was like the Pope speaking from the balcony of the Sistine Chapel. That's how much they wanted it. And so from then on, women weren't there wearing veils. Okay. But I remember as a Catholic school kid in 60, 61, 62, even 63, man, if you were a woman or you're a teenager, you would not come to church without a veil on. If you didn't have one, you would get a tissue, Kleenex, something put on your head, and hopefully that stood on, or you got a bobby pin and you put it on, and they would scramble to put those veils on because that's how much it was ingrained in them. Okay. Now, some people will give the argument that the 1983 Code of Canon Law that was endorsed by John Paul II gives no indication that women are to wear veils. And from that, they conclude that since that's the case, then women no longer have to wear veils. Now, if you go and you analyze the Canon Law from 1983, it allows no such conclusion. That Canon Law says that unless specific and direct remarks are made to remove a former practice from a previous canon, namely the 1917 canon, then you cannot assume that that practice is not to be practiced anymore. Just because the code doesn't mention it doesn't mean it can't be practiced any longer. Okay? And so, but nobody reads those words. Okay? They just assume that, well, because the 1983 code supersedes the 1917 code, that means if the 1983 code doesn't mention anything about veils, then women don't have to wear them. No. The canons, the codes of canon laws have much more respect for each other than we have for them. And all kinds of do not do this, do not do that matters are in the codes that protect the codes from being superseded in specific areas. And that's just, a small portion of what can be said about those canon laws. So basically, there's been no official statement ever in the Catholic Church that women are not to wear veils. None. Nada. Okay? Not one official statement. But it has come about on its own. Thank you to the newspapers of the 1960s. And so on. Okay? So, there you have it. All right. Willie says, was it a sin for the Vatican to invest $100 in the gay movie Rocket Man? $100? Where are you getting that information from, Willie? Sounds like rumor to me. Okay. Why would they invest $100? You mean $100 million? Oh, okay. So you're coming back here and you're saying, was it a sin for the Vatican to invest $100 million in the gay Elton John movie Rocket Man? Well, if they did, yeah, that would be a sin. I haven't heard that accusation. So if you have some source for that, Willie, I would love to see it. Because as you know from watching me on this program, I won't be ashamed to say it. Okay, if that's the case. Well, wouldn't be the first time that the Vatican has not used money wisely and for sinful purposes. I mean, we have a whole history back in the 20th century of the Vatican Bank and its shenanigans with the mafioso and the P2s of Europe, and all kinds of bad things were going on there, laundering money and you name it. Marcinkus, Bishop Marcinkus, who was the head of that bank for a while, when it came time to be prosecuted by the Italian authorities, John Paul II shipped him off to the United States, where he eventually died. But to escape prosecution, just like he did with Cardinal Law when he was being pursued by the Boston police for the the pedophile scandals. The Vatican shipped him off from Boston to the Vatican, and he became some kind of head of something over there. Give him an official title. But yeah, they got him out. So yeah, there's all kinds of things that go on there that we should be concerned about. But if you give me a source on that, maybe I actually should look it up myself. 100 million. Elton John. What happened to Elton John? He started out so good. Or maybe was he that way the whole time? Who knows? All right. Gamers says, I have a question. I just noticed last week you said that you didn't believe in the visions of the divine mercy. May I ask why? I just see too many contradictions. I see too many problems. Okay. If I see one problem, that's enough for me to become skeptical. Okay. If I see one contradiction, it's all I need. So it doesn't take much to push me over the edge. Now that's just me personally. Okay. And as I said, on this program, you're going to get my opinion. But these visionaries, I take every one of them with a grain of salt. Okay. The ones that are approved by the Vatican, I have no problem with. But there's a controversy, as you may know, in the divine mercy between what John Paul II did and what previous popes did. Okay, that's enough for me to keep my hands off. Okay, I only want the purest and the most truthful that we can possibly obtain before I'll put my stamp of approval on it and subject my family to it. Okay, that's just me. You may have more leeway, and that's your prerogative. Okay, as I said last week. Vatican silent about gay lifestyle being a sin because so many bishops and priests are practicing homosexuals. Are you serious, Willie? That's the reason? Oh my gosh. Why didn't I see that? Yeah, you're right, Willie. You're right. I mean, I've seen statistics. I wrote a book on this myself. I sell it on robertsongenis.org in my research, which took about 6 months. I went all the way back to the early 60s, the 70s, the 80s, 90s. I got all the prominent authors that were writing about this, and they all came to the same conclusion. They varied a little bit in their stats, but basically upwards of 50% of the priests, 30 to 50%, okay? And of the bishops, around a third, 33 or lower. But, I mean, if just think about that. If half of your priests are gay, and suddenly they were to vanish from the church, where would the church be? Talk about a dilemma. When I first became a Catholic apologist, there was a priest who tried to accost me and came out of nowhere. And when I saw it, I just said, oh my gosh, what is going on here? And then I talked to some other people about this same priest, and they go, oh yeah, he's a flamer. So I knew I wasn't crazy. And I just said, how bad is it, to myself? How bad is it? And then I began to do the research. As in the late 90s, as I talked about Cardinal Law, and we talked about all the other priests. We just went through the whole McCarrick thing, for Pete's sake. This guy had been working undercovers, literally and figuratively, for how many years? 30, 40 years? My goodness gracious. So yeah, and I had my first taste of it. And they just think of it as just something normal. They just can't see what we see because they're so blinded. A lot of this, as I said, is due to what they did with the Bible. In Catholic theology today, the Bible, at least 90-95% of it, is not inspired by God. Therefore, it's not inerrant. When the writers are writing history, geography, math, science, whatever it is, they're all writing from their own intellect. That's the way the Catholic Church teaches about the Bible today. And so when you come across St. Paul saying homosexuality is wrong in Romans 1, 1 Corinthians 6, and about half a dozen other places, what are you going to do? Well, he's not writing about theology, salvation. He's writing about culture. So you say he's not inspired by the Holy Spirit. He's just giving his opinion on some cultural aspect of life that he lived in the first century. Or if it's the role of women, that's not an issue of salvation. So Paul's just giving his opinion that women are to be submissive to men. Or any other cultural issue you could find. Most of the epistles then are talking about Paul giving his opinions about how the church should be run. But, since they're just his opinions, we don't have to go by them, especially in our day, in the 21st century, when we're so advanced. That's another excuse that's given. Okay? So all these seminarians are being taught in the late 60s and 70s and 80s that homosexuality is not a sin anymore. That's just a cultural idea, a cultural bias that Paul had. And then, when you read about it in Leviticus or Genesis or whatever, oh, well, the favorite excuse for that is, It's not the sin of homosexuality, it's the sin of inhospitality. Did you ever hear that one? I remember when I first heard that one in 1977? Yeah, I think it was. I was minoring in psychology, and we were in an abnormal psych class. Not that the class was abnormal, it was just about abnormal psychology. And we had these two gay guys come in and tell us, because we were in the area of studying abnormal human psychology that dealt with sexuality. And they came in, and this is 1977 now, okay? And they told us, yeah, that the sin of Sodom and Gomorrah was a sin of inhospitality. And at that time, okay, now mind you, this is how many years ago? This is what? 40 years, 42, 3 years ago, 44 years ago. The whole class burst out into laughter. I mean, the whole class. And they were quite ashamed. Today, that's not the kind of response the whole class would say, yeah, right on. Yeah, you're right. It's a sin of inhospitality, not homosexuality. As you can see how the times have changed. Okay. But yeah, I was just absolutely astounded at the information I was finding when I was writing this book. And unfortunately, I think the same thing is happening all over again. They have not retreated. They are entrenched. And the big thing now is pedophilia. You see, that this is another thing they try to do. You separate pedophilia from homosexuality, and you say the homosexual side is okay. It's just the pedophilia side that we have to deal with, because that's where we're being sued. And we're losing hundreds of millions of dollars when these parents find out and they're suing us. Okay? With homosexuality, you don't have to worry about that, because it's usually adult consent that precipitates it. You see. So, oh yeah, got to raise a big stink now about the pedophilia. We'll let that rise to the surface. As a matter of fact, we're going to make you parents feel it with us. And so now the parents of the diocese, of the parishes, are given all kinds of strict rules about when they can be with a child and all this kind of stuff. The parents aren't the problem. But you see how the bishops are shifting the problem and making it appear like, oh, this is an all-pervasive problem in the church, so that the parents now have to be corralled against their own children? That was pretty clever. Oh, that was pretty clever. Yeah, so that's what you're getting today. Okay. Anyway, let's go on. I'm going to go over time a little bit today, because I'm going to try to answer some more of these questions, and I have some energy left, so we'll see what happens. What would God say to an adulterer, same as gay? Yeah. Okay, I'm looking for a question. Yeah, so Joe Biden, the Catholic, yeah, he's an amazing man. By the way, the priest that told him he couldn't receive communion, this is before he became president. This is back in October of what's 2021? Was that 2019 or 18? I know that priest, good friend of mine. And he told me all about it. I got the real scoop from him. I called him on the phone and asked him what happened. He told me exactly. We had it written up in Culture Wars magazine. But it was funny. But Biden has no problem in not separating his democratic platform from Catholic morality. In other words, if you approach him and you say, it's wrong for a Catholic to believe in abortion, he will say, well, it depends on which Catholic you talk to. And that's true, of course. Yeah, you could, if you search long enough, you're going to find a Catholic that believes in abortion. That's for sure. And some clerics believe in abortion. Yeah. But then he'll say, well, my party believes it, and I can't go against my party. That's what he'll say. Okay. So it's the party that rules, Joe. And we knew that from day one. That's what Trump said about him. The party rules Joe. They tell Joe what to do. And Joe, abides by what his party wants, whether it's homosexuality or abortion, whatever. So, yeah, he's just exactly what they have said for 50 years about Biden. He's a follower of his party. So, yeah, well, he's going to have to answer to God for what he's done. And I would not want to be in his place. That's all I got to say. All right, question. I am reading more and more that this Pope has appointed homosexual clergy to high positions within his inner circle hierarchy. I mean, can this be true? Yeah, you can count on it, sweetheart. That's what's going to happen. I love my kids, but do not accept a lot of their behavior. Okay. All right, I'm looking for a question. I listened to your short debate with Hugh Ross. How can he look at the CMB and say that Earth is not central, while others see it as central? Rather, he said it's on the outer edge of things. Well, Zachary, welcome to the world of politics in science. Science is just like any other endeavor, like theology, like medicine, music, philosophy. You start out with an idea that you think is correct. You have a presupposition. And you are convicted by this presupposition. It becomes the kernel of all of your thought, of all of your logic, all your reasoning. Okay? So what happens is any piece of data that you get, you will try to fit it into that presupposition that you've become convicted of. That's because that's your foundation. That's your fundamental grid, that you're this kernel idea that you have, this presupposition that you start with. And don't let anybody fool you. We all start out with presuppositions. Okay? And you're going to allow the facts to go through that grid of your presupposition and come out the other end, and they're going to agree with your. And if they don't agree with your fundamental presupposition, then you throw it out. You ignore it, you put it on the shelf, you ignore it, or you do like Hugh Ross did on our program, that when I brought it up that, hey, Hugh, there's another way to think about this CMB other than it's, on the edge of the universe. And here's how it works. Blah, 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 blah. Now, if you're Hugh Ross, you realize that just blew up your foundation, because your foundation said that the Earth can't be in that position. Impossible. I don't care what evidence you bring to me, it can't be. Okay? And so you see that it's trying to blow up your foundation, so what do? Well, you're going to try to make up stories, whatever you can do to support the idea that it can't be about being in the central part of the universe. That's what happened in that debate. Okay, no matter what data you give him, and especially to an audience that he knows doesn't know beans about what he's talking about, they don't know the physics, they don't know the cosmology, he can basically say anything he wants. Okay, so that's why debates are good. Formal debates, because the cross-examination is the time where you want to put your opponent on the witness stand. And you want to get him to stop with the presuming that his views are right and that anything that doesn't pass through his foundational grid can't be correct. And so you want to try to pin him down in the cross-examination period. And if you can't do it, then you're not going to do it at any time. But look, these are human beings here. They have a lot of pride, a lot of money, prestige at stake. He's built his whole life. He's got, 12 books written on his ideas about this stuff. Do you think he's just going to dump that within a program and say, oh yeah, that's right, I've been wrong all this time. Count me out. There goes his endorsements, his money, his prestige, his fortune, everything. It's gone. You think he's going to do that? Are you kidding? No. So what I'm trying to say, there's a lot of politics in science. And men will hold on to ideas, and they will hold on it till the day they die. Whether they're right, wrong, and different, it doesn't make any difference. They're going to hold on to the idea, and the only time it changes is when the next generation comes and they see the mistakes that were made. That's why, was it Max Planck who said, science advances funeral by funeral. Okay? So there you have it. All right, Jubineerson. How do you answer the objection that marriage should not be limited for procreation purpose because there are married couples who did not or cannot conceive a child, and thus it should not be limited for heterosexual couples and should also be extended to homosexual couples? Well, I don't see the reasoning of the question there. Why? I mean, you were going good there, Jim Aronson, and then until you added in the homosexual thing, I don't know. I could see on the one hand where I thought you were leading, which is if a couple can't conceive a child, they have a legitimate marriage too. And yeah, I think in that sense, John Paul II was correct in that the unitive dimension of marriage is as important as the procreative dimension, okay, for basically the reason you're pointing out here, that, well, what if you don't have children? Does that mean your marriage is subpar, or somehow you missed the boat, or God's not being nice to you, or, what is it? Well, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to play one aspect of marriage, the procreative, against the unitive, nor the unitive against the procreative. They both have to be there. Okay. So the traditional view, I think, is lacking in that respect. And of course, Thomistic philosophy was always lacking in that respect. In the emotional ties, the unitive aspect of marriage, it was always weak in that area. Okay, and that's just the nature of Thomistic philosophy. But you never want to extend this to the argument of homosexual couples. Okay, all right, because they weren't designed to have any unitive aspect to a marriage. Okay. I mean, even if you can't have children, you're still going to have intercourse, okay, with heterosexual couples, but you can't have that with homosexual couples. Okay, so your reasoning is what they call ass backwards. You're putting the cart before the horse. You can't reason the way you're reasoning. Okay, if it was that easy, wow, we could rationalize just about any sin. All right. Question. Last week you said that you did not follow. Okay, I already answered that. Question. I am new to the Roman Catholic Church. Last week you mentioned the Divine Mercy devotion. Okay, I just went through that. Look, let me just repeat. I'm just saying, be careful. Okay, there's been a lot of controversy about that Divine Mercy devotion. Yeah. I just got this eerie feeling whenever I hear it. It just does not sit well with me on an emotional level. On a controversial level, yeah, they've battled back and forth about this thing. And on a doctrinal level, I see some problems. Okay, so I don't know how else to put it to you. That's just my opinion. Okay, you do what you want. You want my advice? I'm going to tell you. Okay. I have a neighbor trying to marry a rabbit. Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. Probably wants to give all the inheritance to the rabbit too. Question: how do you decide which devotions and prayers, etc., to follow? I am new and confused, so I was trying to follow every. Well, it's going to take some time. Okay, it's not going to come to you right away. And if you have any problems, I'm here for you. You can talk to your pastor or anybody you trust. Okay. But it's going to take time to sort them all out. It's been, how long have I been a Catholic now? Revert since what, 1992. And there's things that are still hard for me to sort out. So, yeah. Question: why did the Pope put out a different statement last October than totally reverse position? I'm just curious. Well, I talked about that earlier in the show, so I hope you caught it. There's a controversy, there's a contradiction, okay? They've made a dichotomy, now they have to smooth it over, and they're not doing a very good job, except I do have to give them credit for saying that they're not going to bless civil unions of gay people, okay? That has to be applauded immensely, and I do. I'm just saying that behind the words, there's a little bit more going on that we need to know about and you need to know about. All right. Question: there was a biography of Benedict XVI published early last year where he has some bizarre quotes about a spiritual dimension of the papacy he still retains. What are your thoughts on this? Yeah, let's see. Well, when you get into unknown territory like he is in right now, where you have a pope that's resigned and legally resigned, okay, canonically he has resigned, so that makes it all kosher, and yet still wears the white hat and the white garments, and we call him, Pope Emeritus or whatever. What does all that mean? There's this fuzzy area here, like, wow, does he have some papal spirituality still coming from him that we should honor and pay attention to? All this, yeah. Well, this is that hazy area that you get into. It's all up here, okay? There's nothing in history that's, there's a spiritual dimension of the papacy that the Pope retains once he's resigned. Who's ever worked this out before? Nobody. Okay. So, yeah, this is all virgin territory. So you can basically make up anything you want that's going to give some spiritual dimension to it. In my opinion, there is none. Okay. The man resigned. He ought to go his way and give full reign to Pope Francis, without saying, somehow I'm in the lurch here in case something goes wrong. You can always consult me because I was a former pope. It just doesn't work that way. Okay. You resign, it's over. Go write your books and be happy and, prepare to meet the Lord. Okay. The church is not yours anymore. And, there's some people that want to bring Benedict back. They think that Pope Francis has been legally or illegally promoted as Pope, and Pope Benedict XVI is still the Pope. That's all malarkey. Okay, it's over. And I don't know why they would want him to come back anyway. He was what, in his early 90s, hitting mid 90s? His days are over. Okay, so Francis is about the best we're going to get right now. As long as we can tolerate him till the next pope, or Jesus may even come back, or the antichrist may come, and it'll be all over. So who knows what's going to happen. Question. Back in 93 or 94, you debated 3 men with Madrid and a professor in Fullerton, California. I was there. Do you have this on CD? You and Madrid are unbeatable team for debates. Well, thank you. I think we won that debate. That was in 95, by the way, and that was in Escondido. Was it Escondido? Where was that? All right, it was in 1995. The 3 men on the other side was Rod Rosenblatt, Lutheran pastor, Robert Godfrey, a professor at Westminster Theological Seminary in Escondido, and Michael Horton, who's now the president of Westminster Theological Seminary in California. And that was me, Madrid, and good old Bill Marshner from Christendom College, who's now retired. And that was a very interesting debate. And made a lot of converts that day. I think there were 6 people in the audience who wanted to convert to Catholicism. But of course, we had an audience of 1,500 people. So I don't know how much that says for our success. We like to think so. But yep. And we do have that on, that's on MP3. Go to robertsongenis.org. Look for California debate 1995 in the search engine on Sola Fide and Sola Scriptura. And it's on MP3. It's all there. And at a very good, affordable price. All right. Question. Are there any Old Testament Antichrist types that perform miracles? I'm curious what kind of miracles the coming Antichrist may perform. Maybe the Old Testament has revealed those already. Well, you do get, the first indication of that in the Exodus, when the magicians, Pharaoh's magicians, were able to perform at least 3 of the miracles that Moses performed. Okay. So, but you'll remember the one that they did last, where they turned their rods into serpents, that Moses' serpent ate up their serpents. So, Moses won that battle, even though they could do some miracles themselves. So that would be the first indication. Okay. Then you got there's Saul, the witch of Endor, that came at his request, and that's got to be demonic. What else do you have? Well, you have hints in the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Hosea, Daniel, 12 minor prophets, that there were sorcerers, there were those that dealt with necromancy, all kinds of otherworldly practices that were all condemned, because they were all practiced intermittently throughout the Old Testament times, just like today. Okay. And it varied from the times that they became more prevalent were the special times in redemptive history. Like when Jesus came the first time, you had this dramatic rise in demonic activity. Okay. In Elijah's time, you had a dramatic rise in demonic activity. As a matter of fact, one of the highlights of his life is where he is confronting the prophets of Baal, 450 of them, and says, where's your prophet? Tell him to, strike fire on this wood that I've gathered here, if he's such a great God. As a matter of fact, in the Hebrew, it says, after they've waited a long time for this God to strike a fire on the wood, Elijah says, maybe he's went to the bathroom. Actually, in the Hebrew, it says a little more graphically than that. Okay, I'm just being polite here. And so, but at that time, you got demonic activity coming along. In the Exodus, they're just about to leave Egypt, and so you got this rise in demonic activity. Whenever in the redemptive scale of things, God wants to move from one place to another, redemptively speaking, you get this rise in demonic activity. So, and it's going to be at the end of the world. The apocalypse talks about this dramatic rise in demonic activity until you reach the climax where the man of sin, the Antichrist, is revealed, and he has, as 2 Thessalonians 2:9 says, he has the power of miracles. Okay, so yeah, they're going to all be on the preternatural scale, not on the supernatural scale, where he can't create something, but he can use what's created and reform it, adjust it, make it into an illusion, whatever he needs to do to deceive, much better than a magician can, because he's going to be able to move matter, and he's going to be able to reform it, and all kinds of weird things on the preternatural scale he's going to be able to do, and he's going to be able to do it with more power than anybody else that ever came before him. See, that's the thing with the Antichrist, is it says in verses 3 and 4, he's going to make himself better than any previous prophet or any kind of religious idea that came along. He's going to be better than them all. Okay, he's going to basically, how like when a ruler came, even with the Roman emperors, one Roman emperor would pay tribute to the one before him and say what a great guy he was. And now I'm going to be great, and I'm going to continue him. Not with the Antichrist. He's just going to blow everybody off and say they were nothing compared to what I'm going to be or what I am. Okay, and I'm actually from God. Just like Jesus was from God, I'm from God. And then I'll prove it by doing these miracles. So you can see how he's going to be so deceiving. It's going to be very hard for anybody not to be deceived, which is probably why Jesus said, if the days weren't shortened, even the elect would be deceived. That's quite a statement from Jesus. Okay, so there you have it. Renee Gunan, I don't know anything about him, Matt. Sorry, I can't comment on that. All right, Arnold, I promise. Question. Okay, here's a long one. And then I got to go because it's 10 o'clock. Question. Milo, in an interview, said that the born gay agenda is false. Oh, this is Milo guy. Yeah, I've heard of him. I think I've seen him on YouTube. But the born gay agenda is false. Okay. But he does say that the major impetus for choosing a gay lifestyle is the propensity for some to potentially adopt the lifestyle, while others are more geared to heterosexual relationships. I'm trying to unpack what you just said there. Major impetus for choosing a gay lifestyle is the propensity for some to potentially adopt the lifestyle. I'm not sure what you're saying here. Are you saying that They're going to tease themselves that they may become homosexual. So they have a propensity, but they might not be one. I'm not sure what you're saying here. So in sum, all it takes is a combination of one of the following circumstances to trigger the gay confusion: overbearing mother, bad father relationship, or absent father, or a psychosexual perverted event such as sexual abuse, etc. For him, it's a nature and nurturing problem. His implication follows the doctrine of the fall and concupiscence. Everyone has sexual integrity issues at various levels. What's your take on Miles' analysis? Well, it's not a black and white issue. Of course, if you have an overbearing mother, a bad father relationship, an absent father, a psychosexual perverted event, sexual abuse, these are all going to affect you in some deleterious way, whether it's to become a heterosexual pervert, or to become a homosexual, or to become a sexual recluse, or whatever. Who knows? Who can predict what the result of that's going to be? Because these things are so complicated. But we can safely say on the nature side of things that yes, any kind of negative exposure to a aberrant sexual activity is going to contribute to some confusion the person has in his mind. Although there are some that have gone through these horrendous experiences and come out very normal, okay, and can put away the past and say, well, that's what I went through then, but now I'm an adult and I can do this and this and this. Now, they might have some baggage along the way that they have to carry, okay, but they'll deal with it, okay. So we don't want to throw away the environmental side saying, well, that has no effect. No, it does have an effect, okay. I think you would be rather obtuse not to admit that. On the other hand, okay, when Scripture's covering this topic, not once does it suggest to us that the reason why an adult homosexual remains homosexual is because of something that went on in his past. Not one. It doesn't give a hint of that. Okay. If anything, it says this person is responsible for the state they're in. They have every power from God's green earth to get out of it. Here's the problem. They don't want to get out of it. They like it too much. And since that's the case, God has turned them over to that very lust. It says it 3 times in Romans 1. God turned them over to their lust. In other words, God is not neutral. If you continue to pursue this kind of sin, he will open up the path for you to go deeper into it so that you will never get out of it. So this is the kind of dynamic God we have. You don't want to mess with him. Okay? That's the message Scripture continually gives us, that it's our responsibility, not somebody before us, not Uncle Joe or Daddy who didn't treat us well, or an overbearing mother, or yeah, they're all going to lead us in a certain direction, but then we become adults. You see, then we figure out right from wrong, if we haven't already, and we know what path God wants us to go. Okay? And that's why Paul says in Romans 1, nobody has an excuse. Not one person. He will take into account what you went through. and what you're probably going through. But the fact remains that you're responsible for the final decision. You have that capability. Okay? So there you have it. That's the dimension of it that the present world doesn't want to hear. Of course, they don't want to hear that about any sin that they're committing, whether it's adultery or stealing or whatever, political intrigues and, all kinds of, they don't want to hear that. Okay. Oh, it's Joe asking this. Yeah. So let me go back up there and say, propensity for a son to potentially adopt a lifestyle. Well, I've known guys that have toyed, let's say, with homosexuality, and they just wanted to know, what it was like, kind of a thing. I've known guys that have had attraction to other males, and it was a question basically whether they're going to feed that attraction or stop it. And if somebody's talking to me and they say, well, I got this predilection, I got this predisposition toward, men of the same sex, and I just can't control it, it just overwhelms me, blah, blah, blah. Well, I said, you know what? I've got a predilection to, Susie down the street who wears, mini skirts and, perfume and earrings and makes herself look attractive. And I see her coming out of her door every day. What am I going to do? Oh, well, I'm just so weak. I just can't stop myself. No. Okay. So I have that temptation. And is that any worse or better than your temptation? Look, we all got temptations. We all have them. In your life from one end to the other is a series of avoiding temptations, whether it's sex, money, booze, alcohol, drugs, prestige, being a hot shot, whatever it is, whatever your attraction is, we're all going to have temptations, and we all have to fight them. We live in a sinful world. Homosexuality is no different than any other sin. Okay? So, all right. Roger says, maybe they meant blessing using the sign of the cross, not laying on of hands. Maybe, but you don't make a sign of the cross for somebody else. You do it for yourself. Okay? It's a private thing. So I don't know there, Roger. Question, what is your response to these textual criticism radicals who claim that if the Lazarus miracle were true, it would have been reported in all the gospel accounts given the magnitude of the event? Well, right away, it's a presumption. They're presuming something they don't know is a fact. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you can make the argument, because it's in John chapter 11, you can make the argument, well, why didn't John cover some stupendous event that occurred in Matthew, Luke, or Mark? There's a lot of them that John didn't cover. As a matter of fact, that's why John's gospel sticks out so much, because it doesn't cover a lot of the history. Okay? So, the thing about the gospels is nobody really knows. I mean, they've put so much study into this, trying to figure out why this gospel says that, why this other gospel says that, and they just haven't been able to figure it out. There's a dozen theories out there for why, this miracle is said here and this miracle, Matthew's very chronological, Luke's very topical, Mark is very Has no frills and spills. He just gets right to the meat of the issue and just bang, 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 like he's stating facts. And, okay, so we got 4 different personalities writing these gospels. Okay. 3 of them are Jewish. One is a total Gentile who had nothing to do with the Jews. He came from paganism and became a convert as a Gentile. So he had nothing, he doesn't know anything about the Jews. Writing Luke's gospel. And then you got John writing from the advantage of having read all the other gospels that were written in, say, the late 60s or 70s, and John's writing his in the 80s. Okay. And able to look at things from a totally different perspective. So, but don't let them pretend. See, it's easy to raise a question like this. Why don't the Synoptic Gospels cover, the Lazarus miracle? It's easy to raise questions like that. It's much harder to answer them, you see. And we know what their agenda is. Their agenda is to try to make it look like these gospel writers weren't inspired by the Holy Spirit, to make them look like they're just some haphazard, Joes off the street that just happen to, get these stories, and they all think that the gospel writers, the synoptic gospel writers, embellished them. When Jesus supposedly fed 5,000, it was actually a boy who had 2 fish and 5 loaves, but the people brought their lunches, so that explains that miracle. That's what they're trying to do. This is what their agenda is. And they've been trying to do this since the 1700s. They had the first quest for the historical Jesus. That failed. Then they had the second quest for the historical Jesus. And that failed. And now they have the third quest for the historical Jesus. There's some out there right now trying to do it. And what that is you try to separate the historical Jesus from the spiritual Jesus to find out who the real Jesus was. And they find out that it's impossible to do because the spiritual and the historical are so intertwined, you can't unloosen them. It's like the double helix of DNA. You take one helix out, you destroy the whole thing. That's what they found out about Jesus. So, yeah, it's just somebody is huffing and puffing. The glorious thing about John's gospel is that he does mention he does mention Lazarus's miracle, and with good reason. I mean, think about it. Jesus has tried to hold back his identity for 3 years, 3.25 years, let's say. Now he's just about to go to the cross, and he has to do some. This is how John's chronology works. Most of it is like right near the cross. And he's going to the cross, so now it doesn't matter whether he holds back his identity. It's like no holds barred. I'm going to reveal who I am, and I'm going to do it in the best way possible. And that is, I'm going to raise somebody from the dead who's been dead for 4 days, so that nobody can say, oh, he was just sleeping there. And, Jesus came at the right time. Now, Jesus waited 2 days before going to where Lazarus lived so that Lazarus would be dead for 4 days. And he knew the Pharisees were going to be there. And once the Pharisees saw this miracle in John 11, what does the rest of John's gospel tell us? They planned to kill him. You see, because that's the pinnacle of the miracles that Jesus did. Raising Lazarus from the dead in front of all these people. Okay, so John placed it perfectly. Okay, so there you have it for John's historicity. There's a perfect reason why he put it where he put it. All right, let's go on. Do you think the Bible rules out lower life forms on other planets? Yes. There is no life on other planets. No life, no biological life. Okay. Vatican II is a different religion, not Catholic. It is apostasy. That is false. And you'll hear me say that many times on this program. Okay. The problem is not with Vatican II, it's with the interpreters of Vatican II. You know that old saying, guns don't kill people, people do. Same thing with Vatican II. Okay. I'm not going to get into the SSPX right now. Question: what are your thoughts on Saint Pope Paul VI concerning so much written on him being homosexual and possibly a Freemason? If true, how could he be declared a saint? This doesn't add up. Well, I don't believe he is a legitimate saint. You're never going to get me to believe that about Paul VI. Yeah, we even know who his lovers were. So now he put out a denial, but the denial does not negate the evidence that we have, and the evidence is clear. And I read that on this program many months ago. So, and the church has never said that canonizations are infallible. So, yeah, we have and doesn't it seem strange that John the 23rd, Paul VI, John Paul II, and possibly now Benedict XVI, who knows, have all been sainted. And these are the popes that have come along at the worst time in the church's history. And I'm talking about homosexuality, pedophilia, the breaking down of the seminaries, the universities, the liberalism that is, just marched through the churches, the loss of priests, the loss of nuns, the loss of everything, basically, that we had, all came in the reigns of these popes who are now being sainted by someone who is a very liberal pope. Yes, Francis I. Doesn't it tell you something? Yeah. If it doesn't, I think something's wrong with you. Okay. We are asked to be obedient, but we're not asked to be stupid. Okay. And there's no way anybody's going to convince me that Paul VI is a saint. We'll accept it as, the legal stamp of the present Catholic Church. That's what they've told us. Okay. But we each have a conscience. And if our conscience does not allow us to pray to him as a saint for spiritual favors, we don't have to. Okay. That's one glorious thing about the Catholic Church. All right. Okay. So I think I got to get going. Here's 10:20. We will have a program tomorrow. And tomorrow, our topic will be at the top, will be about marriage and divorce and remarriage. Speaking about marriage that we did today. But we're just going to be talking about it within heterosexual communities, not homosexual, okay? Because there's a big difference between the Protestant view of marriage and divorce and remarriage and the Catholic view. I don't know if any of you were aware of that or not, but as you know, the Catholic view says if you get a civil divorce, you cannot get remarried. And if you do, you've committed adultery. In the Protestant world, and I don't know any exceptions to this, if you get a civil divorce, then you're considered truly divorced and you can get remarried without committing adultery. Okay. Two very diametrically opposed views of divorce and remarriage. If you ever want to see one, that's it. Okay. So who's right? Who got it right? I cover this in my Matthew commentary. I cover it in the New Commentary at length, dealing with all the exception clauses and, Paul's teaching on marriage and divorce in Romans 7 and 1 Corinthians 7 and 11. all that, and all the synoptic gospels on this passage. So, because why? Well, why is it important? Well, because if you are divorced civilly by this secular society, and you get remarried, and yet you're not supposed to be remarried, okay, then you are living in adultery. Simple as that. Okay. So that means a lot of marriages out there, even though they may not know it in Protestant world, a lot of their marriages are or they're living in adultery because they think they can get divorced and remarried with with impunity. And the Catholics say no. Why do they say no? We'll find out tomorrow night. All right, so we'll see you then. God bless you all. Thank you for being with me. I hope I have helped you in a good way to sort out the confusions in our Catholic life and our life in general. God be with you.